putting in work. Work, yeah. Putting in work. I thank God for the favor when the money come. Half for the time, tax fees, insufficient funds. What I gotta do to get ahead? I'm on to something. What I gotta do to get a raise? They all be one putting in work.
Welcome to the Modest Sports Show, home of your college athlete, where we are player-led and player-focused. You guys know the slogan. I hope you said it with me. Guys, tonight we are filming this. The time of this recording is November 13th, 9:25 p.m. What can I say? Today has been a day just trying to get a lot of things done as it pertains to the podcast and bringing sponsors on the show and things of that nature. So just trying to wear many different hats. To be honest, when I first started off on this journey, I did not think a podcast would be this much work. But it is, and I'm thankful for that too. Really challenging myself, really putting myself in different areas and different zones and having to adapt and just like I said, wear different hats and just be just be all in one and be multi-purposeful, I guess you would say. And so, guys, tonight I don't really want to even talk about much. It was in my intentions, or it has at least been in my intentions, to go live for the college football playoff reveals. I really think that would be fun. Aside from that, if you haven't, be sure to catch our lives. We've been going live on Mondays, and I try to splash in a little day towards the end of the week. So you guys will see this potentially Thursday morning, Thursday afternoon, Thursday evening. Sometime on Thursday, this video will come out. And I really, really want to go ahead and apologize for like the uncertainty in times. I definitely, for branding purposes, definitely got to get on track with like time and stuff like that. But like I said, just really wearing a lot of different hats right now. So guys, just work with me, man. Just please, just work with me. Now, like I said, definitely want to get into some of these college football playoff rankings, the newer rankings. This is week 2. Week 11 rankings. I kind of like how they're doing it too as we're getting closer to the season. Just kind of keep track. And that way it doesn't take us off. It doesn't take anybody by surprise, right? As we get past the conference championships and we start to kind of get down to who's actually going to be in and who's going to be out. So if you made it this far in the show though, before we get started, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, rate and review us. We're on Instagram. Be sure to follow our Instagram page. Be sure to find us on TikTok. We just got a Twitter page. Be sure to like our content and follow us on Twitter. I try to do a lot more on Twitter, like kind of give a little bit more graphic content, so or visually appealing graphics and stuff like that. So just be sure to go follow us on all our social media. And I run majority of the social media, so keep track with us and, drop an opinion. And that's the one thing I'm loving as we're getting deeper into this and as I grow more in this. Like, I love, like, we got different opinions. Let's talk about different opinions. You think something differently than I do? Let's talk about it. I'm displacing that competition I had on the field to debating about it now. So, like, I gotta let off some of this competitive steam somewhere. So, let's talk about it in some of these topics and whatnot. But let's get right into this. And I'm also going to be referencing week 10, kind of fill out what my thoughts are on where we are. So our week 11 college football rankings has Oregon listed at 1. Ohio State listed at 2, Texas listed at 3, Penn State listed at 4, Indiana at 5, BYU at 6, Tennessee at 7, Notre Dame at 8, Miami at 9, Alabama at 10, Ole Miss at 11, 12 Georgia. So we'll go in ascending order. We'll go up. So starting off at 12, Georgia. This is going to be a quick episode, just some quick hitters, right? Starting at 12, Georgia. 12 Georgia, I think the committee, I really believe the committee is doing everything they can to keep Georgia in there. Even as inconsistent as Georgia has been over the entirety of the season, especially on the offensive side of the ball, I feel like the committee is really trying to say, Georgia, come on, step up. Because I think the committee probably feels like they did Georgia a disservice last year with them being a one-loss team and being out, and then, so I really feel like Georgia is a team that the committee is trying to drag along, and they're giving you chance after chance. And so Georgia has a big test coming up this weekend with Tennessee. November the 16th, that game is in Athens. So Georgia is definitely going to be, or Tennessee is favored in that game, but Georgia has the advantage. So I'm really looking forward to see how Georgia comes out. They really should play like a team with its hair on fire, if I'm being honest. They're going to be at home. I think they definitely needed a home game, especially after the way they failed to Ole Miss. So I'm ready to see what Georgia does and how they look ready to see how they look this weekend. Moving on to number 11, Ole Miss. Ole Miss is coming off a very impressive win, an extremely impressive win over Georgia. In that game, Georgia defensively, especially Georgia's box and their interior defenders, looked amazing. They got a good push coming off the ball. They looked very dominant and physical over the course of that game. I think that everything that they did in that game showed the team that they could be. And to be honest, had they played every game the way they played that Georgia game up until this point in the season, they'd easily be undefeated, right? So Ole Miss is a serious team, and I think, to be honest, I feel like under a Kiffin-ran football team, you kind of question the defense. Offense, he's going to create plays and he's going to put players in positions to be successful and to go out and score points. But I think defensively it was always a question mark, similar to the guy out west in L.A. and Lincoln Riley. And so Ole Miss is coming off a very impressive win. Clearly we know the stats prior to Ole Miss and Kiffin coming into that game. I believe he was 0-4 or 1-5. It was an odd stat against top 5 ranked opponents. So for him to come out and get a big win like this against Georgia, my hats go off to him. I'm ready to see, and I might say this a lot over the course of this show, but I genuinely am, obviously because I love the sport, but I'm really ready to see teams build off of the morale, right, that they're kind of picking. It's a couple teams picking up steam as we head into the playoffs. And so I'm really ready to see how those teams step up to the plate, how they step up to, whatever their opposition's level of competition is and elitism. And we'll see. We'll see. So Ole Miss, very impressive win. And I think that team has a lot, especially coming off a Georgia game, they have a lot of good things to build off of. Alabama coming in at 10. Alabama, very impressive road win at LSU this past weekend. Very impressive. I put a tweet out. Was it a tweet? Not a tweet. A graphic. I made a quote on yesterday about Alabama and how they looked and how impressive they were in that road win at LSU. Came in with a great running game. Very solid defense, very solid defensive play, let me say. They dominated every facet of that game. They didn't allow LSU's offense to get in a groove and Nussmeier to kind of get a throw on his spot and make throws that he typically does make. They made it challenge on him, and that's the second weekend in a row that we've seen that LSU offense somewhat struggle. We saw it in the second half of the Texas A&M game. Relative to how they started in that game, didn't look well in the second half. And then we transitioned to Alabama and how they looked against Alabama. And it's just, it's like that LSU team, they lost their spark midway through the season. And the one thing that I hate about the LSU and that loss is potentially you can say that definitely knocked them out of playoff contention And I really felt like that was a good team. I really felt like they were building, but it's like when they got to Texas A&M, they ran into a roadblock, and they just weren't able to rebound and get back into the swing of things. So definitely interested to see how LSU does going forward, but for this Alabama team, they needed that win. Obviously, that was a must-win game for both teams. Alabama stepped up to the plate. Alabama was my pick in the game, even though I didn't drop a Corey Thanks this weekend, but Alabama was my pick in that game. And like I said, ready to see how they continue to build and how everything else plays out in the SEC. Moving on to 9, Miami. Miami is a team, like I think we all agree, they had been playing with fire. Even if we go back to third or fourth game of the season when they played Cal, right, and how they barely escaped that game. So, and there were games over the course of the season. It was Duke, Louisville kind of stepped up and played them well. Like they didn't. Somebody made the analogy. A talking head said Miami had been playing with their food. I couldn't agree more. Just playing with your food. They have a very stout offense and a very explosive offense. Wow, the defense is very liable to give up points. I think at one point, last time I checked the stats, they were ranked 50th in the country in total defense or somewhere in that area. And so Miami is a team that is like they have a large upside. They also have a very low ceiling for what they can accomplish this year. They got all the right pieces they can to be an elite team, especially offensively, which we know that's what you need. But at the same time, the defense has to be able to stop people. And so Miami is they're a team to look out for, especially being at 9-1. I believe they're tied with SMU in that conference. And so that could potentially, SMU and Miami could potentially be an ACC championship game. That's just something for us to watch out for. Moving on to 8, Notre Dame. Notre Dame, I really like Notre Dame in the sense that they've been particularly quiet since that NIU loss, right? Just slowly building. And I compared Notre Dame to Alabama. To Clemson in the sense of they experienced early season losses, and while the rest of the world went undefeated or maybe they lost the game to a more worthy opponent, they just kind of slow-paced. They just continue to play week in and week out, and here we are at the end of the season, 9 games into the year, and Notre Dame is sitting at 8-1. So Notre Dame is a team that I'm like, okay. Now, obviously, we see them lose to a Group of 5 school, but, I mean, hey, they're shaping out to be right in the mix when it's all said and done. Notre Dame, while I do feel like they don't quite have the offensive prowess to compete with a team they may see in the playoffs, I definitely think they're a solid football team. I expressed this earlier in the year following their performance against Texas A&M. And Notre Dame they're just a solid team. You know, when they're playing good football, they're a solid team. So Notre Dame is coming in at 8. At 7, we have Tennessee. Tennessee is 8-1 at this point in the year, only having lost a game to Arkansas, which Arkansas was a very good football team this year. Hate that they were kind of riddled with injury, and that Arkansas was a very good football team. Arkansas, very good football team. But anywho, that's their only loss on the year. And they've looked pretty good in every game. I think they've shown different facets of offense. They have a very strong defense. And I think the biggest plus side for them this season, it's not even necessarily because obviously we know Josh Heupel can spread the ball, and he has he's another very consistent offensive mind. They've stepped up in 2 areas over these past 2 years, at least dating back to the 22 season when they kind of had a spark. They have a running game in Dylan Sampson. Dylan Sampson looks amazing. He impressed me earlier in the season against lesser competition, but nonetheless putting up big numbers like NC State and teams as such. I think their defense has stepped up tremendously. Their defense, Tennessee is kind of like, I get Ole Miss vibes when I'm thinking about Tennessee. Can explode on offense when need be, and can stop you on defense when need be. The biggest thing with Tennessee is obviously the quarterback situation. We seen Nico go down against Mississippi State. Shout out to the Bulldogs. Obviously, we know why. But, I mean, Tennessee is a team that, as we continue to head into the postseason, they could do big things. And the one thing that I'll say, because I feel like it's necessary to say it at this point in the rankings, is the SEC is undoubtedly one of the craziest conferences in the way things are ending. Because obviously, if we were to stop and take a snapshot, if we were to end the season today, Texas and Tennessee is playing in the SEC championship game, obviously. Now, just in the top 12, you got Tennessee, Texas, Alabama, and Georgia. Ole Miss. That's 5 teams. 5 SEC teams in the top 12. I've been talking to a lot of people around me. No matter which way you cut it, right? Because I know, let me finish my thought. No matter which way you cut it, the SEC has the best competition from top to bottom. A mid-tier SEC team is liable to beat a top-tier team in this conference. The Big 12, we don't see that. The Big 10, we don't see that. Not to say we don't see it ever. We rarely see it. So the SEC, man, you got to love it. Like, you really got to love it. Now, of course, it's more than likely not going to look like this as we get down the stretch. Because, again, Tennessee plays Georgia this weekend. This is a must-win game for Georgia. Must win. But let's just say Georgia beats Tennessee. Tennessee goes to 8-2. You had an Alabama team that beat Georgia. You had an Ole Miss team that beat Georgia. All these teams would then have the same record. Alabama's about to play Mercer this weekend. That's 8-2. Ole Miss, 8-2. Georgia, 8-2. Tennessee, 8-2. At that point, just throwing that scenario out. This is going to be very hard. Very difficult to say the least. And it may get even deeper with some of these teams than just win-loss columns. It might have to go to point differentials and the way you played and just all these other factors. So I can't lie to you. If you're on the selection committee, you got a tough task in ranking these teams, but also selecting who goes and who doesn't. Because obviously we see Boise State. At this point in the rankings, there's no group of 5 school. I'm just picking that up. Boise State dropped to 13. So, I mean, yeah, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough. It's going to be very tough, but I'm all here for it. Let's pick back up. We're on number 6, BYU. BYU obviously being undefeated. Very controversial call in that Utah game to end it off. But to BYU's credit, they finished the game. Utah kind of allowed that situation to suck the life out of them and take their momentum away. Those types of things are built for you to say, okay, that challenge, all right, they got it. We about to double down. We're about to bear down and still get this win. BYU did what they were supposed to do. So you can't be mad at BYU. I saw Utah's AD make some comments, and he was fined, I think, $40,000 for it. So can't be mad at BYU. BYU is looking at, they're hot right now. I think the Big 12, right now, they're the only team in the Big 12. I think the Big 12 is going to be very interesting because, I mean, clearly if BYU wins out, they'll be the only team representing that conference. But Colorado is on the roll. And Iowa State, Kansas State still have to play one another. So that conference, unlike similar to the SEC, but almost just a little bit different. The Big 12 is 4 teams that are really just hanging right there in that space. And then for the SEC, it's like 5 or 6 teams, right, that are in that order, or I guess in that conversation. So very interested to see how, the Big 12 kind of comes to an end. Does Colorado pick up, or does Colorado win out and defeat a Big 12 team in the Big 12 championship, or does BYU win out and play Iowa State or Kansas State? So the Big 12, a lot of these we can only really go based on what ifs, like what might happen. So a lot of football is going to be being watched. Indiana at 10-0. Indiana is really a Cinderella story this year. I know we really only use that term in college basketball, but for the sake of football purposes, Indiana is at 10-0. I don't think anyone expected that preseason. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe they were ranked 5 or 7 coming into the year. So Indiana at 10-0 in the Big Ten is something. Now, Indiana will be getting tested soon with Ohio State, because Indiana had, to their credit, they've looked very good, Indiana, but we have not seen them play against an elite level of competition like we have seen Ohio State or Penn State or Oregon in the Big Ten, because that's really what the Big Ten is. Oregon, Ohio State, Penn State, Indiana. That's what the Big Ten is. Michigan, obviously, a letdown season. USC, a letdown season. There's nobody else in the Big Ten. Like, let's face the facts. So Indiana is at 5. They're looking very good. Ready to see what they look like against Ohio State. Penn State at 8-1. Penn State at 4, being 8-1 with their only loss to Ohio State. I'm skeptical about Penn State, man. Like, always very skeptical about Penn State, just because we know. I had the stat, the lower third on the show some weeks back, or a week ago, when talking about the Penn State and Ohio State game, kind of leading up to it. But Penn State has yet to win the big one, right? We know how they look against the mid-tier Big Ten teams. They beat up on them. They look like a dominant football team, but they get in the game with those guys, the guys who look like them, and the product just isn't the same. So this Penn State team sitting at 4, if I'm being honest, they have no reason not to win out. I think the rest of their schedule kind of permits them to win out. In the case that they don't, I still think that they're able to kind of wiggle their way into the playoffs, but I don't expect a championship run from this Penn State team. Not this year. Sitting at 3 is Texas at 8-1. Texas is another one of those teams. I'm skeptical about Texas. Obviously, they needed this win against Florida this past weekend. It was a dominant win. Florida actually didn't look as good as I thought they did. They were on the road, so, could have some effect. But Texas took care of business with Florida. I think Texas is a great football team. I think sometimes Quinn Ewers does struggle to step up to his level of competition like a Carson Beck. All in all, though, this Texas team is going to be, it's kind of interesting. It's kind of like I'm sitting back watching what they're going to do, too, because do they have what it takes to win at an elite level? Like, we know Sark has built the team up, this Texas team, to be a great product. But are they championship contenders? That's what I want to see from Texas. Because right now, outside of the SEC, right, because I think the SEC has kind of reverted back to what it was at one point in time, where it's just hard-nosed football. I think it's slowly trying to make its way back to that. You do have some finesse offenses like an Ole Miss, but we see Georgia go heavy personnel, 12, 13 personnel, sets, big tight ends. So I say all that to say I'm ready to see how Texas kind of looks against an out-of-conference team like Oregon. Like we seen them against Washington last year. They didn't really step up to the challenge. this season, if they were to make it deep into the postseason, how does that look against a team like Oregon or a team like Ohio State? So this Texas team, they have the weapons. They have an Isaiah Bond. They have a Quinn Ewers, like I mentioned before. I like the tight end. I believe his name is Grant Nelm, if I'm not mistaken. But I definitely think they have pieces to make that offense go. Defense is stout. A lot of good players in their secondary on the back end. Just got to see them put it together and, like, show me that you can play at that level, you know. But who am I? Second, coming in at 2, we have Ohio State at 8-1. Ohio State at 8-1. They are second only to none other than Oregon. Ohio State at 8-1 though. Their only loss being to Oregon. For the most part, they've looked pretty impressive this season. Like I said, I think the deep ball was kind of something that we touched on, and their inability to kind of make plays on the defensive side of the ball down the field. But I must say, over the past couple of weeks, they've looked stout. They've looked good. I think this Ohio State team, especially offensively, I think they go as Will Howard goes. So does Will Howard, if he's productive and if he's passing the ball and spreading the ball around, I think that actually this Ohio State team is kind of tricky. This Ohio State offense is tricky from a standpoint. I think when they're able to pass the ball, they can run the ball better versus being able to run the ball and being able to feed off of that by passing the ball. I think this Ohio State team is kind of backwards. They have a lot of weapons. They have a Jeremiah Smith, a Mecca Ibuka. They have a Cardinal Tate. They actually got a good tight end as well. I can't think of his name. But I think that Ohio State team they got all the weapons, and that's what I like about this whole list of teams. Like, if I'm looking at what a lot of these teams have, they have what it takes. They have what it takes to be great teams. It's just who is actually going to go out and do it. What players are actually going to be locked in to be able to get that done. And then lastly, moving on to Oregon. Okay. Oregon is my 2024-2025 college football playoff champion for this season. I believe Oregon is that good of a football team. I watch a lot of football, obviously. Oregon has shown me that they can win at any level. They've showed me that they can win and beat any team. But also, this Oregon team has shown me, especially Dylan Gabriel, I think last season, right, they had a very good team. They had good running backs. They had an okay defense. This year they have a good defense, a great defense, a great offense, and very good running and very, very great running back, should I say. And I believe Dylan Gabriel, right, I'm a very cerebral guy, for those of you that don't know. And I like to watch guys and how they move and how they interact with their teammates. How do they interact with media? Like, what's the temperament of a guy? Dylan Gabriel gives me this very calm but very confident demeanor about what it is that he's going to accomplish. And I think he's the perfect centerpiece in that Oregon offense as they near the playoffs to stay even-keeled, don't get bigger than the moment, but confident that we're going to go out and get this done. So this Oregon team, and like I said, I think they have a defense to match, unlike a season prior. They have a defense to match, and this Oregon team, they look good, man. So I think I kind of came to the realization midway through the season, like, these guys are going to win a national championship. I think they're that much better than the rest of these college football teams I've named. I think it's fair. That Ohio State is second to them, given that, that was a pretty close game. Like, Oregon had a chance to take an L at home in that game. So Oregon is my team for the. I'm gonna ride with Oregon for the rest of the year, and hope that they get it done to prove me right. If they don't, though, the competition is very stiff and fierce, and so it's understandable. But like I said, I think Oregon is that much better than the rest of the level of competition. So, like I said, this was a very, very brief episode tonight. I really don't even know how long I went tonight, but I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you haven't, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Tomorrow evening, you will have this episode by tomorrow evening. So tomorrow evening, right, when by the time you watch this whole episode and you get to this point in this episode, we are going live. Be sure to join our live tomorrow night. Can't wait to see my beautiful listeners and guys. It's a great time. We have a great time in the comments. Like I'm telling you, the people who do join, we have a great time. It's a lot of fun debate. It's a lot of back and forth, and I'm just the moderator. So join the live. I'm sure you'll love it and enjoy it just as much as we do. And guys, if you haven't, go follow us on social media. We social media on TikTok, Instagram. Be sure to turn your post notifications on here on YouTube. And what else am I missing? Twitter. Go follow us on Twitter also. We are new on Twitter. We're trying to get that like count up. And just like that, we are out of here. Have a good night.